Welcome to Break the Pipeline, brought to you by the law offices of Sauda Johnson PC. I am Sauda Johnson-McNeal, the founder and CEO of the firm. I've been an attorney for over 20 years, and I'm licensed in New York and California.
Hi, I'm Naomi Barerra. I am an attorney licensed in the state of New York, and like Sauda, I have also been practicing for over 20 years.
At Break the Pipeline, we dig into the real-life factors that shape children's lives. As attorneys, we analyze all sides, the legal intent and the real-life impact.
From school discipline and child labor to family conflict and mental health, we explore how laws and decisions can influence the path a child takes.
Our mission is to understand what affects kids and how we can help move them forward. This is Break the Pipeline.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Welcome to Break the Pipeline, brought to you by the law offices of Sauda Johnson PC. I am Sauda Johnson-McNeal.
Hi, and I am Naomi Barerra. Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending where you're at.
So today's topic, are tech companies responsible for harm to kids? And where do parents and schools fit in?
We hear people say social media is harming kids, but today we're digging deeper. Who's actually responsible? Is it the tech companies for creating these platforms, or is the responsibility shared?
Today we're looking at both sides of the debate, as we always do on Break the Pipeline. Side one, tech companies hold primary responsibility. If you design and control an environment where you know children are present and you know harm is occurring, you are responsible for what happens in that environment. This isn't just kid making a bad choice. This is a system that studies, predicts, and influences those choices at scale. In any other context, if you knowingly created a product that exposed children to harm and you had the responsibility to reduce the risk, you would be expected to act.
What's the other side, though? The responsibility is shared, and it starts with parents and schools, not tech. Technology may influence kids, but it does not replace the responsibility of parents and schools to guide, supervise, and protect them. We are asking tech companies to do what parents and schools are supposed to be doing, guiding behavior, setting limits, and recognizing risk.
Okay, so before we get into who's responsible, we need to understand what's actually happening right now in this legal battle across the country.
Well, Sauda, I got to tell you, this is a great topic for us to discuss because it's happening in real time. Hundreds, arguably even thousands of lawsuits happening right now. There's lawsuits against Meta, who many of you know is responsible for Instagram and Facebook. There's TikTok. There's about 14 states suing TikTok. And then there's YouTube as well.
Absolutely. So the total number of pending actions in the adolescent social media addiction, it's crazy. And the case has increased to like 2,407 throughout the month of February.
Yeah.
2026. 2026, yes.
In real time. So what are states and school districts and families alleging? They're saying that platforms are intentionally designed to be addictive. They're exposing kids to harmful content that leads to depression, eating disorders, self-harm material, and dangerous interactions. Some of these claims include that there's a defective product design, failure to warn, and negligence. I have 2 kids, size. You know, we've always mentioned, and you know, you have your little baby. So these issues are very, very real right now.
Absolutely. You know what, Naomi? This is very important to tell everybody because, you know, I always say we're attorneys, so we're not going to ever forget that when we have these conversations. For the first time, courts are seriously considering whether social media is not just a platform, but a product, okay? So now let's look at the law. There's a federal law, which is the Communications Decency Act, and it's basically to promote continued development of the internet and other interactive computer services. So tech is saying, hey, under this law, we are a legal platform and we're protected, right? But what if it's more than just a platform? That's the way parents can really try to get around this federal law. My child was harmed because of how your platform is designed. So what can parents do? How can they sue? Well, if it's a product, they're saying we're not suing because of the content. That federal law will block them. They're suing for how the platform is designed. Defective design, as Naomi kind of mentioned earlier. The product is built in a way that creates unreasonable risk. The infinite scroll, algorithms. You know, these algorithms are very serious right now. These features are designed to keep the kids hooked, even when it harms them. Failure to warn. The company knew the risks, but didn't adequately warn users. For example, mental health impacts, exposure risk. And then, of course, the big one, negligence. the
Right.
company failed to take reasonable steps to reduce known harms. So, for example, not strengthening protections for minors, allowing easy contact from strangers. In this social media addiction case in California, judges have allowed some claims to move forward where parents argue platforms were designed to addict minors. Companies knew risks and didn't act. So, if we really want to break it down to layman's terms for our non attorneys out there,
Right.
it's basically like saying, hey, the difference between suing a bar because someone had a conversation at that bar versus suing the bar who knowingly served alcohol to minors and created unsafe conditions. But let me tell you, we're not here to debate the law or decide these cases. That's for the courts, and that's not what we do on Break the Pipeline. We'll tell you the law. Of course, we'll give you our feedback, but at the end of the day, we're not looking at whether the law is right. We're really looking at the underlying issues. We look at both sides. Here, are these children being harmed? And who is responsible? Tech, parents, schools. That's kind of the connection. What's happening?
Well, let's look at our individual states. In October of 2025, New York, along with other states, has filed lawsuits again against TikTok, Meta, which is Facebook and Instagram, Snapchat. We're familiar with all these platforms, right, and YouTube. And they're
Yes.
focusing on youth mental health, the deceptive safety practices. Interestingly, New York is alleging that these platforms are substantially interfering with school district operations and imposing a large burden
Mm,
on cities, school districts, and public hospital systems that provide mental health to the youth. New York is accusing them of negligence for designing and marketing their platforms to young people in a way that they know is causing serious harm. Like they're
wow.
able to quantify it now based on the number of kids that are coming into the hospital system. This may be reminiscent, Sauda, right? We've been around the block for a little bit now. You
A little bit.
remember gangster rap and how the political game turned their eyes on the dangers of gangster rap in the 80s
Yep.
and 90s? They blame rap for violence, for crime, for moral decline, which is music, right? The
Right.
government's response was to have hearing, censorship attempts, and parental advisory labels. The key idea, though, at the heart of it all, is that the argument was the content that was shaping behavior.
Right. And Naomi, same thing with video games. The video game makers were being blamed for aggression, school violence. You had several cases that really talked about whether or not this was protected speech. Okay. California, they had a law which prohibited the sale of violent video games to minors. And they got sued for that, right? Because it was argued and there was achievement there that hey, this is violating the First Amendment. So courts, they're ultimately said, even if the content is harmful, it's still speech, not a defective product.
What do those cases have in common? They focus on content. Courts consistently lean toward free speech protections.
We are not just talking about content, it's design. Rap,
Mm,
something you listen to. Games, something you play. But social media, it's tracking behavior. It's adapting to user. It actively shapes what you see next. I
mm,
mean, I've literally said, Naomi, I honestly feel like some of these companies are in my mind somehow because I go on, I research something, maybe about the baby. Next thing you know, I start getting all of these different ads about that same exact product. These tech companies, they've created ways to be able to continue to send you more information about the product that you are researching. Okay. So it's personalized, it's predictive. These platforms, they don't just exist. That's the argument. They're learning the kids what they like, what they linger on, what keeps them engaged. Direct access to the children. So
right.
strangers can reach these children instantly. So harm can happen faster, at greater scale, and with less visibility to adults.
Okay, so we've seen society blame music and games before,
Right.
but this is the first time the system is actually influencing kids and it's learning them, tracking them, and responding to them in real time. So the question isn't just whether the kids are being affected. We've seen that before. The question is whether this is still about influence or whether now we're dealing with something fundamentally different. Listen to this, Sauda. Some people have actually started equating the social media moment with cases against tobacco companies and opioid markets. Like that's the level of harm that they're arguing are being imposed on these children. Cigarettes affected their health, right? Opioids affected health. Social media, they're arguing, is affecting health.
That's a real conversation. If you think about back in the day with the whole cigarette thing, ultimately, the cigarette companies, they did have to make changes to
Right.
think about children and how children were being impacted by ads. They had to start doing disclaimers. These are actual facts of what happened in terms of some of the changes that the tobacco companies had to make and ensure that they were not targeting or asking these kids to come, hey, smoke with us. We have cherry, we have watermelon, right? Flavors that seem to attract children. So that was a very real thing, Naomi.
I just want to say, Sauda, for a second, that the way our society is moving, the law is not catching up quick enough, right? Because yes, we talked about cigarettes. Yes, we talked about the game and the rap and opioids, but now there's also vaping, right? Vaping is
Mm.
something that is going to come soon because now, and this may be slightly off tangent, but they're lacing these vapes that were supposedly targeted towards children with fentanyl, and some kids are dying. I'm glad we're talking about this. The law is the method with which we put these companies in check. So I've digressed. Let's get back to the topic at hand.
No, it's a very good point. And really, even though social media, this is a new conversation in terms of the law, as we've already just pointed out, none of this is new. We have to just continue to adapt and figure things out as we go. Let's get into side one. Tech companies, we've already said the argument is they're not passive platforms. They're active architects of behavior. They design systems, they capture attention, they shape behavior, they maximize time spent, and they continuously study user behavior. What keeps the kids engaged? What triggers emotional responses? What increases dependency? This is going to be the argument that is potentially going to hurt the tech companies.
These companies know that they're influencing kids, and they are refining that influence every single day. Also, these platforms allow direct, often unmonitored communications with minors. There are bad actors, including predators, that can find, contact, build relationships with children. We've seen it. It's happened already. I don't know if you're familiar with Roblox, Sauda. Roblox is a
Yes.
platform specifically for children. My daughters have been on Roblox. They had me sign on and create an account. It wasn't my thing, but the point is, there are adults acting like there are children on these platforms and using it as a method of gaining access to these children. There's an argument there.
No, it's scary stuff. I mean, if you think about real life, and again, this is what we have to look at when we argue these sides. You are a human being who is out here running a business trying to make money. That's what all of us do. We just can't work for free, most of us. Okay. So we understand you create these platforms and we understand that you want to have the best platforms. It's competitive. There's other platforms out there. But really, we're not talking about let's just make money. You have to look at when you're running a business, how all these different new innovations that you're coming up with, how it's impacting people. If you have children and you are the people running this company, then think to myself, okay, would I want my child to really be on this platform? And if you don't have children, then maybe you have nieces or godsons or cousins, or just put yourself in the shoes of that kind of perspective and say, you know what? Maybe I don't want to create a system that completely allows strangers to be able to interact with children. Maybe there's something that I have to set up because you see all the time, even some of the platforms where we watch television, it'll say, hey, set up this kids section here. And then it has the option. Do you want to allow them to search? YouTube, perfect example. When I set it up, no, he can't search. Like there are all these kind of parameters that
Right.
even phones nowadays, they can actually have these kind of boundaries for what children can and can't do. And the argument is tech companies, maybe you need to think about that. Enough people have told you what's happening out here and how your design, your product is impacting our children, and stop saying, "Oh, well, that doesn't matter because we're just this company." Stop doing that. Actually take the time and have these think tanks and figure out how can we fix the issue, right, Nay?
Well, but that's part of their pushback right now. Instagram, for instance, created a teen account. So if you're under a certain age, you can only have access to a certain component of Instagram. So their pushback is we are doing things and putting protections in place. We can't control if there are bad actors that act like they are underage, but we are, from the company's perspective, putting everything in place that we're supposed to. But the onus has to be on the parents, the school districts, and everyone else, not on us. We've done our part.
Yeah, no, that's interesting pushback. But here's the thing. Technology is amazing. I'm
Hmm.
going to say that again. It's amazing. You can have a whole conversation with AI just by typing things in. The people who are kind of not going with this side, they're going to say, even if it's a teen section, you can come up with alerts when there's a stranger. You can come up with alerts when there's some inappropriate conversation. Come meet me here. I'm being extreme as to what those suggestions would be. I'm not in tech. But the idea is there's enough technology and innovation that if you
Hmm.
really took the time to understand how these children are being impacted, that you could figure out a way, right? That's the one side. But let's talk about the other side because that's important. If there's some people who say no, tech companies, they can create the platforms, but at the end of the day, they're not raising children. They're not the ones who are teaching the judgment or the values. And that responsibility still sits with the parents at home and the schools during the day, right?
Yeah, but I think if we take the cigarette again, for example,
Mm.
right? You know, us growing up as kids, they were everywhere. As a matter of fact, you would walk into the bodega in the Bronx or Manhattan, and the signs would be under the little kid's height. That's where the ads would be for the cigarettes.
Right.
And the cigarettes company was like, we can't control who buys this, but yet they're inadvertently, implicitly advertising to those children. We see it with McDonald's. They know what they're doing because the bottom line in this country is capitalism. It's let's sell what it to as many people as possible. But it is up to the courts, it is up to the families to say, wait a minute, this is having an effect. I'm not sure if you know the effect it's having, but it's a detrimental one. And I'm here and I'm going to go to court to let you know that this has to change. And this is what we're seeing right now. This is the moment we're living in. And again, this topic is just so timely because they currently have two test cases happening to see how well they fare. If the tech companies lose, a lot of money that's going to have to be paid out. There's kids that have committed suicide. There's kids that are going through mental health therapy right now, and it's they're going to pay a big penny. So I'm curious to see what happens here.
So let's get into side two. The responsibility is shared and it starts with the parents and the schools, not the tech. This is an important argument because at the end of the day, what we're basically stating is, hey, parents, this is the people who are from the tech side. Hey, schools, you are the ones who are responsible for allowing them to even have access to the computers, having access to the phones. Because if you don't give them a phone, if you don't give them that tablet, if you set these boundaries and you raise your children in such a way that they understand values and judgment calls, then we wouldn't be having this conversation.
I gotta tell you though, again, bringing it back to my home, my children are currently 12 and 14. And what they showed me is that it comes a certain age where they are begging for it because not being on it now, you become socially an outsider.
Yeah.
Literally every kid at a certain age is on social media. And if you happen to be the one kid that's not, now you're a bad parent for causing your child to be an outsider. So there's those pressures that I've had to succumb to as well. I think there has to be a middle ground because, like you said, technology is amazing. And we've enjoyed TikTok dances. We've done it ourselves, probably. You've done it. Have you done it? Yeah. So the point is, there has many, many
Uh,
benefits.
right.
It has many benefits, but the exposure and the harm that many are being subjected to has to be addressed.
Let's get into supervision and awareness, Naomi. What are your thoughts as far as what parents may say there?
Many parents don't fully understand these platforms. They don't monitor consistently and they assume their child is safe. Not understanding the risk doesn't remove responsibility, though. It means that the responsibility hasn't caught up to the reality.
Right. I mean, I think that's a good argument because there are a lot of parents who are older. For example, I'm an older parent. My husband and I, we are.
Sauda, stop. She said she's an older parent child.
What I mean is that the age difference between my child and I, it's great because I have been raised in this technology society, as has my husband, and he's a techie.
Hmm.
It may not be the same, but if you took us back in the day and you had
Right.
this huge age difference between a parent and their child, or just a parent who maybe just doesn't have the same level of education or access, it makes a lot of sense that you can say, well, these parents are older. They may not know how to use these social media platforms. That's a very real
It
conversation,
is.
as
It
opposed to
is.
younger
Mhm.
parents. It's like 20 years maybe difference between them and their children, and they grew up on the same technological society as their children. But the buck stops with the parent. And you can't just say, well, I didn't understand it. Because as a parent, and I'm speaking for myself, anything that I don't know because of just me not understanding what these young people are doing right now, I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to learn it to make sure that when it impacts my baby, I'm able to educate him accordingly. Let's talk about schools. Schools are dealing with this because conflicts that start online
Mm.
while children are in school, bullying that never leaves the phone. I have clients who have been bullied via these online platforms, and both of the kids go to these schools. So that brings the school in. And then the behavior is shaped by the content. Right? Schools were never designed to supervise a child's digital life 24/7, but now they're being expected to manage the consequences of it. That's a very real thing, Naomi.
Yeah, it's a very real thing. It is. The tech platforms don't create predators, though. People do. That's the argument. Predators actively seek out kids. They exploit vulnerabilities. They move wherever access exists. Even if one platform is restricted, the risk doesn't disappear, it just shifts.
Ooh, that's a good one. I want to really stop on that. The predators are not being created by the platforms. That's the argument from the tech side. We cannot help the fact that there are predators out there. And I don't care what tech we create, what we do, predators are always going to find a way to get to these kids because that's what they do. It's like a con man, right? The con man is going to always figure out a way to run the con. A criminal
Right.
is going to always figure out a way to break the law and do the crime,
Hmm.
regardless of whatever laws are put in place. So tech is saying it doesn't matter what we do. We can put all the protections in place. We can't do anything about the predators. So it's on you, parents, and it's on you, schools, to be able to look out for these children to make sure that they're not harmed. That's not our job. That's a big deal.
Yeah, but it's still a weak argument. As members of society, we all have responsibilities. You can't just say it's not my problem. They're gonna fall in that hole anyway, so I don't gotta try to cover that manhole that I created so that people can build pipes under the ground. You have
Right.
responsibilities as a member of society. And even if it's not your individual child that's being impacted, a child in your society is being impacted and you should care. And so taking this argument that it's, hey, they're just gonna get to them the other way, it's a weak argument. Parents can push back on that. It's a weak argument.
Absolutely, absolutely. When we talk about accountability, if you place full responsibility on tech companies, then we're going to risk ignoring the role of the adults and the institutions closest to the child. That's what the tech side is going to say. We cannot take the job away from parents. How does that play out? What do you think, Nay?
Well, harm doesn't happen just because technology exists. It happens when access is given without enough guidance, supervision, and boundaries. When we talk about balance, parents can't fully put it on the tech companies. There has to be a level of responsibility. Like my kids are both on. I'm not as well versed as one would expect a parent to be, but I am aware enough that I can monitor how long they're on, monitor and cut it off at a certain point. If 4 hours have passed and you haven't done homework and you haven't gone to sports and you haven't gone to take a shower, something is the matter. And as a parent, the onus is on me to be able to lessen the exposure.
This is a wonderful topic. As we always do on Break the Pipeline, we have to talk about what are some of the solutions? How can we as a society come together and figure this out? I'm going to jump in with some of my ideas. Nay, I don't know if you've thought about it, but first and foremost, like I say, for every Break the Pipeline, I probably do it every time. Can we have these people come together? Can we get to the point where parents and the tech companies can come together, or schools and tech companies? I know it sounds so idealistic, but at its most human level, if the tech companies can hear the parents and hear the schools and know what they're dealing with, walk in their shoes, and vice versa, if the tech companies can share what they're experiencing and what they're trying to do and have a meeting of the minds and some compromises, I just think that could help. That's just me.
I mean, I think this is the moment we're in right now. By them having to go to court and lay out all their positions in a way where there's a judge and jury that's going to listen to both sides and come to some compromise, I think that's exactly what's happening in real time right now. Absent this court system and an impartial jury and a judge that's going to be by the book and uphold the law, probably a little harder. But hopefully out of these lawsuits, we will see some good come from this. And I know I speak for my children and your baby and all the children in our society. Something's got to be said. There are countries that literally have banned these platforms. We have to see why. Why is it that our children have full access? Yes, there's freedom of expression, freedom of speech. We got that. But what is in these platforms that has made these countries say, no, not here? So I think we are, to your point, Sauda, living in a moment where both sides are coming to the table.
As we close this out, my final thoughts are: tech, listen to what is being said. Look at the history, look at the cigarettes, look at the music, look at the video games, and do everything in your power to stop encouraging children to engage when it's not needed. Look at putting protections in place so that predators can't access them. Whatever that looks like, hire the greatest minds and figure it out and implement it. Parents, at the end of the day, do your job as a parent. Make sure you see what your kids are doing, even if you have to monitor it and record it. And for me, it's not going to be a secret. I'm telling my baby, look, anything that I pay for, I'm going to be all up in it. The privacy rights, that's not going to happen in our household. So just be very clear of that. In schools, do what you have to do on your end during the school day to monitor and make sure our kids are safe. That's my final parting words on this topic, Naomi.
As you were speaking, Sauda, I had one final thought. What if they created an automatic shutoff at a certain threshold, like 2 hours in, you're shut off? The point is that there are things that can be done. Everyone would be happy, excited to see where this ends up, and hopefully we still maintain our freedom of speech while also protecting our children. Thank you so much for spending this afternoon or morning with us.
Yeah.
Look out for what's happening. Everything's online as far as the developments that are happening with this area right now.
We thank you so much for joining us once again at Break the Pipeline, brought to you by the law offices of Sauda Johnson PC. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Our goal with this podcast is to show two opposing views of our society, and it's not necessarily our own opinions, but we do hope that our listeners can understand that there are serious issues and not everyone is on the same page all the time. And our hope is to bring it to the community at large.
So if you want real talk, compassion, and legal insight from attorneys who care deeply about our youth, you are in the right place. We're the law offices of Sauda Johnson PC, and this is Break the Pipeline.